Gloucester. Gloucester lies on the eastern side of the River Severn, with the geology being mainly Permo-Triassic sandstones and Lower Jurassic clays. Gloucestershire has a great depth of history, stretching back into the prehistoric. The earliest highly visible features are the stone-built Cotswold Severn long barrows, 6,000-year-old Neolithic tombs that preserve the earliest known dry stone construction in the county. While the later prehistoric hill forts, such as Crickley Hill and Uliburry, form very prominent features in the landscape, the lowland areas of Gloucestershire were densely populated with farming settlements in the Iron Age, and more of these are constantly being found as developments extend around Gloucester, Cheltenham and the smaller towns. By 49 AD, the Romans had constructed a fort at Kingsholm to guard the river crossing of the Severn, and would have been a banked enclosure with wooden walls and gates. This was followed by a later fort built around 64 AD, on the site of Gloucester town centre, and the town became known as Glevium. After the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons captured Gloucester in 577 AD, and in 679 AD founded a monastery which revitalised the town. In the late 9th century, Gloucester became a fortified town, and in 909 AD the remains of St Oswald were brought to Gloucester, and this shrine became a priory in 1153. In the Middle Ages, the population increased to 3,500, and in the late 11th century the Normans built the castle to protect its border against the Welsh. Gloucester received its charter in 1155 from Henry II, and the city's prosperity increased through the processing, dyeing and exporting of wool. In 1455, a canon of Lanthony Priory, Robert Cole, compiled a document recording the houses he collected land rent from within the borough. By the 15th century, Gloucester had declined as Wales had been conquered and the Severn crossing became less strategically important. A new charter in 1483 was granted by Richard III, and a mayor and 12 aldermen could be elected. The Abbey Church of St Peter became a cathedral in 1541. In the 18th century, the city demolished its market cross, and the town gates were removed to aid traffic, and a new prison was opened on the site of the castle in 1761. The railway arrived in 1840, and in 1851 the city's population was 17,500. By the end of the century, 47,000. For a city, Gloucester has a remarkable collection of surviving early buildings. Recently, in 2018, a tree ring series developed from Roman timbers excavated at Quay Street has been dated to extend from 377 BC to AD 94. Some of the earliest standing buildings are stone-walled, including Gloucester Cathedral and Blackfriars, with roof timbers tree ring dated to 1125 and 1250 respectively.
Well, one of the most exciting things about Gloucester is just the sheer quantity of timber framing that we found that survives. We've got about 30 buildings in Gloucester, with a big date range right across the timber frame tradition, right from sort of 1125, I think is the earliest, up until around 1730 is the latest. So we've got the full story across, but everyone likes an early building, and one of our earliest we found there is Dulverton House, which is hidden behind the cathedral. It's actually the sixth form college now for King's School. It's not really a building that's been noticed before, but inside in the roof there we found a pretty unique roof, and we've got an incredibly early date of 1220s for the Dulverton roof there, surviving beautifully intact. It's absolute perfection.
The fact that this turns out to be 1220s is remarkable, because this building has an incredibly sophisticated carpentry design, not only incorporating the truncated principal rafters, but it also has curved wind braces. And so the features that you see in Dulverton House suggest not the beginning of a tradition, but an established and extant carpentry tradition already by 1220 that we didn't really expect.
Although many timber-framed buildings are now hidden behind later brick facades, some wonderful examples are exposed and have been previously tree-ring dated, including New Inn, dated to 1432, and the Folk Museum, dated 1509.
Well, in Gloucester particularly, we're excited that we found hidden away surrounding in the cathedral precinct 3 very early roofs around the 1420s and 1440s, and it's a specific design of roof. We call it a fan truss, and you basically have your apex of a roof and you have a collar, and you have what's more common is just a king strut going up to the collar and supporting it, but here we've got a beautiful fan, 2 arching braces or struts going either side to support your roof and to stop it basically collapsing. We found 3 of these, and it's a very tight range of within about 20 years they seem to have just been using this type of roof in these 3 buildings. And linking it to the rest of the project, we have found a few others in Newent and Tewkesbury, and same date range. So diagnostically for dating roofs, this is wonderful. It's gold to have found fan trusses have a very narrow period of use in time.
2 buildings with early close studding at 14 College Green and Little Cloisters have recently been tree-ring dated by the Gloucestershire Dendrochronology Project to 1463 and 1508 respectively. Many other splendid examples with visible timber frames have now been tree-ring dated, and these include buildings with jettying at the Parliament Rooms, dated to 1492, and the Dick Whittington, dated to 1488.
The Dick Whittington is a stunning building. It's a pub near the old West Gate. The front of the building has been replaced with a sort of 18th century Baroque front with nice urns on the top, all very pretty. But behind, of course, is the real juice. And this is an L-shaped building with a long range extending backwards from the street frontage and one on the street frontage. And it's jettied, or it was jettied, which is where the upper storey projects outwards over the street on 2 sides. And the exciting thing about the Dick Whittington is that obviously if you have a jettied front, you clearly have to have an internal first floor. But the roof is smoke blackened, so we know that there must have been an element of an open hearth somewhere in the building, and that the hearth can't burn on a wooden floor, so it must have burned at ground floor level. So we get one of these curious half-storied houses where the front section of the building with the jettying out over the street has got a first floor, but the rear bays are open. And so it had an open fire burning on the ground floor. So there's like a whole kitchen bay occupying 1/2 of the width and depth of the house. Now, that's not something I've ever seen in any of the buildings I've looked at in Devon or Somerset. And I think the closest parallel is here in Tewkesbury, where we found several buildings that are very like that, where there's a kind of... It is an extraordinarily condensed version of the medieval hall house, where you're mixing an open hall and an open hearth with storied elements, and it's absolutely fascinating.
Well, further up the high street from the cathedral, we've got a very unassuming couple of buildings with a date range of around 1560, which is just coming up to the flowering of timber framing, where you get lots of decorative features and the Elizabethan flowering, the peak of it. And what's exciting for us is in this building, while there's not a huge amount from the outside, inside there's enough survival to get a date, but we've also associated people with this. So we've got Thomas Weeks, we know pretty well from our documentary evidence would have been the builder at that period. And it's very rare to actually find the human element of what has constructed these buildings. So here we can relate it to not only who was on the throne, the politics of the time, we know the actual people, which is really what archaeology is all about, relating whatever we're looking at to the people and what was going on and why they did it.
2 of the earliest buildings dated by the project in Gloucester are the Hall and Chapel at Dulverton House, dated from 1205 to 1227. And a hidden surviving cross wing at No. 7 College Green, dated to 1396. In the cathedral itself, the Lady Chapel roof has been dated to 1477.
It's the rate of survival that we've got in Gloucester that's pretty much unique. I mean, you can walk through Gloucester High Street and you'll see a number of buildings hidden behind later facades. And what the project has done is really identified the sheer number of timber frame buildings that are surviving behind these later facades. In Gloucester, we've got a city very much like York, which is also famous for its survival timber framing, where there is massive, huge amount of survival just behind later brick facades. Not just an Elizabethan flowering, which you get in some areas, but a full range of buildings and styles, right from the earliest traditions, 1200s, incredibly early for survival. We don't come across that many timber frame buildings surviving like that. Right the way to the end of the tradition around the 1700, we got the full story there, and all we got to do is walk through that front entrance of the pub or the shop and look up. And so that was one of our main aims of the project, to see if it was there in Gloucester, and we found it.